Welcome back. It is Jeff Santos Show, 34 minutes past the hour. And as we do every Tuesday, it's time to talk to our great friend, Mr. Mark Taylor-Canfield, the Renaissance man of the Jeff Santos Show. He is indeed a man who is never sleeping. You know, he plays music till wee hours of the morning, gets up, that's his job. Democracy Watch News, Daily Kos, of course, right here every Tuesday on the Jeff Santos Show. How many hours of sleep are you working on, Mark?
Well, let's just say that we're probably not quite recovered from last night's event at the Showbox Theater in downtown Seattle, right there next to the market, because we had a big event there that went on pretty late. But that was really cool, Jeff. It was a celebration of all of the groups, including Historic Seattle and the Seattle Theater Group, that are trying to buy the Showbox Theater and save it from the developers who want to turn it into a high-rise luxury condo. Instead of the venerable old music club that it's been since, the days of Duke Ellington when he played there.
Wow. Well, you've done such great work on this, Mark, and we got to get into it a little bit later. But I want to get your thoughts on what is happening to media. And you and I have been existing, in the alternative media sector. And we just talked with, our good friend, and I know you're a big fan of Robert Craig, about this very issue of people like Chris Matthews, and of course James Carville doesn't have his own show, thank God, and others who are out there just bashing Bernie from wherever he can be. And I'm just wondering, as somebody who, I know you don't spend a ton of time watching these cable news networks, but you see this, and of course this drives the other quote-unquote mainstream news folks to sort of ask stupid questions like, well, is Bernie Sanders too much of a socialist, as if socialism, is like Brezhnev in 1975 or Stalin of 1952. I mean, this is not Fidel Castro either. But, this is how they sort of throw these things out there, and it becomes a narrative and a talking point. And it's outrageous. It's poor journalism, and it's at the point where the bias is so much created by corporate news, which you and I have talked about. But I just want to get your thoughts here, because I know the people that you talk to on a basis are huge Sanders supporters, and none of them, want to have, a reincarnation of Brezhnev or Stalin or anybody else.
Yeah, Jeff, I just sent an article off to the nation, by the way, about this issue, about corporate bias in media, and about Bernie Sanders in particular, but also some of the other candidates who run, and just the difference between why we're, 48th in the world on the World Press Freedom Index by Reporters Without Borders because of corporate-owned media, where only a few corporations, about 5 of them now, own like 90% of all of the media that you consume every day. Mm-hmm. And so it creates a limited framework for people to speak through and get access to, and so it leaves a lot of people out. And, as well as, of course, the domination of the two major corporate political parties in the United States, which also dominate and block a lot of other third parties and independent candidates from getting anywhere. They've monopolized the primary systems, too, but that's a whole other issue. But, the corporate media is very biased against Bernie Sanders. Of course, I might be kind of controversial in saying this, but I'm just trying to point out the truth, and I'm trying to hold people accountable here. I see a lot of bias against Bernie Sanders in the Democratic Party.
Of course.
So, if you think about this, it starts actually on the far right when you have people like Donald Trump saying that that the whole problem with Democrats are those radical leftist socialists.
Right.
Like that is the dirty word now. That is the McCarthyism style trick that the right wing is using right now to try to scare people about Bernie Sanders. They never say specifically Bernie Sanders, but behind every statement about socialism on the Democratic Party platform and at these debates, whenever Pete Buttigieg or any other candidate raises, a concern about socialism, and they're talking about Bernie Sanders. But, we cannot deny that. That is clear. It's plain. It's evident. It's self-evident. They just don't want to say Bernie Sanders. But socialism is the new profane curse word that you use to try to frighten people into thinking that the communists are taking over. And there are actually people, Jeff, on the right who believe that, who really think that the Democrat is full of a bunch of communists and that they're trying to take over the country, and pretty soon, we're all going to be marching down the street with waving red flags and having an authoritarian, situation, and not unlike what we have now, but only with the socialists as a leader. And the thing is that Bernie Sanders represents pretty much, in terms of the politics of Northern and Western Europe, I would say he represents pretty much the middle of the road. I mean, he would be probably like a...
As I said, Mark, not to interrupt you, but I mean, this is a classic case of what the Democrats used to be, the Michael Moore line. And one of these days, I'm going to try to get Michael Moore on the show. He said it, and I think that the Sanders campaign should repeat this every time they do an interview, whether it's Bernie or the campaign team or surrogates and so forth. In 1990, Sanders said, we tweeted out this the other day, and I appreciate you retweeted it for me, is the fact that in 1990, along with Ben and Jerry of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream, and Michael Moore asked Bernie Sanders, well, what is a democratic socialist? And Bernie Sanders told him it's what the Democrats used to be, meaning FDR, who gave us Social Security and gave us a WPA, and then in the second Bill of Rights would have given us health care and so forth, and Harry Truman introduced single-payer health care and desegregated the military, and Eisenhower even was a Republican. Of course, you had the big highway system that he developed, and then of course Kennedy with Peace Corps and wanted to stop the back and forth, the Cold War with the Soviets, and then of course LBJ gave us just in a couple of years civil rights, voting rights, Medicare and Medicaid. That's what the Democrats used to be when they were a majority party. You say that, and I think you get rid of this stupidity that, it's some kind of monster ideology that's bringing us back to Brezhnev.
Well, I laugh at the rhetoric coming from the right. Now, when it's coming from the Democrats, that's a different story because we have, 44 billionaires backing Joe Biden and 41 backing Pete Buttigieg. So the billionaires have jumped in the race. We've talked about that before. Howard Schultz, the CEO from Starbucks, billionaire, is trying to run. Bill Gates is out, talking trash about Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax. You've got Mike Bloomberg, who's saying his own independent campaign, just kind of thumbing his nose at the Democrats. And, you got Tom Steyer, who we've talked about before, and, I've talked to, and nice guy, but another billionaire from Silicon Valley. And are they really in touch with the average working people in the United States? I'm just going to assume probably not, Jeff.
Yes, I think you're a great assumption.
The issue about the right wing saying that, the Democrats are full of a bunch of left-wing radical socialists, give me a break. They're mostly corporatist Wall Street folks who are backed by major corporate interests, and they themselves are, I'm still trying to figure out whether they're more afraid of Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders and his socialism. So you've got the same problem in the Democratic Party, and you've seen that right on the stage during the debates where Buttigieg and the former candidate from Colorado who's dropped out of the race sounding the alarm about socialism. We can't be radical. We got to apparently risk, this is their strategy, risk alienating our own base again. This is in their minds, their base at that point being, I guess, the grassroots Democrats. And in an attempt to steal support from a right-wing candidate. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to work. I'm still trying to figure that out. But apparently there's a lot of people who are doing just fine under the status quo, and Wall Street seems to be doing great, and, Trump says it's a great economy. So those folks who are billionaires and backing the other corporate candidates, they're not very happy about the idea of having Bernie Sanders as in the White House either. So, and it's also, there's also a bias from those candidates and from the right against Elizabeth Warren because of her wealth tax. So the two of them, but especially Bernie, are kind of the target of all the fear-mongering right now. And it's even happening in the Democratic Party. And it's very obvious to people like me who observe the media, and I do try to to monitor what's going on in corporate media. And I've always noticed that the networks are very biased against Bernie Sanders. This idea of democratic socialism to them is like this thing that's way out of far left field or something, and it's not. I mean,
it's what the Democrats used to be when they actually did good things for the working class.
Internationally recognized socialist candidate on our city council who just got reelected, Shama Swant. There's a Democratic socialist running against one of our incumbent Democrats in the House of Representatives in Washington State this year, and also in Congress. So Adam Smith is being challenged by John Call, who's a Bernie grad and self-described democratic socialist. So there you go. It's the future, and unfortunately, the corporate media and some folks in the Democratic Party are not quite ready for it. But
exactly.
A lot of those kids out marching in the street for climate change, they're not afraid of democratic socialism. They just want change, and they want it now. And for Miller Jayapal, she was sounding like Angela Davis or something there in Iowa talking, doing a stump for Bernie, and she said, we want radical, institutional, major change, revolutionary change. And what she's talking about, of course, is a social revolution, the kind of thing that Bernie Sanders has been talking about. She's not talking about some kind of violent revolution. She's talking about let's get back to FDR, who, by the way, would now be considered probably far too radically, socialist for most corporate Democrats.
Right, exactly. I mean, FDR is the example of where Bernie, again, should be hugging. Even Amy Klobuchar, no friend of the progressive Bernie Sanders left. I mean, she's not a bad person by any stretch, but she's quoting Roosevelt, and how the impact he had on people at the end of the debate the other night. She said, as the story goes, an individual was caught by a reporter crying at the casket being sent down Pennsylvania Avenue in 1945 when Roosevelt died. And he asked, the question was, asked by the reporter to the person who was crying, did you know Franklin Roosevelt? And he replied, no, I didn't, but he knew me. Meaning he took care of me, his policies understood me as the individual, the working class individual, who was down in the dumps and the depression. And that's Klobuchar. Again, my advice to the Sanders campaign would be, take Roosevelt and make him yours, because really it's the truth. He is much closer to where you are than I think any president, over the last, 80, 90 years. And I think that's a winner. By the way, just to think about this, we just handed this information a few minutes ago. Today in the New Hampshire polling amongst Democratic voters, 67% were for Medicare for all versus private insurance, 67, and 58% were for free college university. Those are two big Bernie issues, and that to me shows that Bernie's going to do very well tonight. And if you think about it, Mark, the things that have, public option right now is considered the mainstream thing, where you couldn't get it passed, with the great Obama and Biden and so forth. So Sanders has moved the entire health care debate, from where it was in the middle of the road to center right. Don't forget, the Obamacare was Romney care, we know because we're here in Massachusetts, and, was created by the Heritage Foundation, a think tank, but it was a conservative think tank. So, we're now where we should have been a long time ago. And I think the American people and the younger generation, your age and a little younger, Mark, are leading the way.
Yeah, and like I said, I live in Seattle. I just went to this great event at the Showbox Theater last night, and people were, of course, talking politics, because politics and art and culture definitely coexist and often intertwine. And so this idea of the corporate power that we're fighting in Seattle, where we're trying to save this beautiful music venue, and it was such an honor, Jeff, to be up on that stage. I mean, you get tingles up and down your spine. You just think of I'm standing where Duke Ellington performed.
Yeah,
right?
that's amazing.
This is where Gypsy Rose Rose Lee was performing, because she was actually from Seattle. But you also have, all the great rock bands, and Eric Clapton and Prince and David Bowie, and anybody you can think of. And not too long ago, by the way, Bernie Sanders up there with Pramila Jayapal and Shama Sawan, and oh my gosh, those are some powerful people in our community. To see those two powerful women together and up there with Bernie. So there's been some amazing things that have happened there. And it's the same kind of issue, this corporate power that's tried to take over our city council last year during the city council races by bankrolling a bunch of candidates. The same kind of corporate power that's trying to run the Democratic Party and bankroll the candidates, except for Bernie Sanders, by the way. And, that's the other thing is, ask yourself, why are the billionaires not supporting Bernie Sanders? Very obvious. He does not serve their best interests at all in any way, and neither really does Elizabeth Ward at this point. So that's where we're at. And in Seattle, it comes down to actually groups like Historic Seattle and the Seattle Theater Group, Friends of Historic Belltown, Rise Up Belltown, great people. Also, the Washington Trust for Preservation was there, these are really amazing groups that are working really hard to preserve our community from being overdeveloped and, buildings being just demolished. I mean, I wrote an article in the Seattle Star, it's kind of a joke saying, real estate developers declare war on Seattle because in my neighborhood, every building except for, a few here and there got knocked down in the space of about 1 year. So all you see everywhere is concrete and rubble and twisted rebar, thinking, wow, was there a bombing raid or something? I mean, it's like rebuilding the whole city, or at least sections of the city. And a lot of that is Amazon and Google, by the way. But here we are gathering in Seattle trying to save what's left of our heritage. And actually, I think we all agreed that it's getting better, partly because we do have candidates like Pramila Jayapal, who's running for re-election, by the way, this year, but safest seat in the country, so no problem there. She'll win by 80%.
Oh, yeah, that seat is so progressive because it represents the great city of Seattle, and it's not, gerrymandered to the point where you get, Spokane and Eastern Washington and everything else, and it's thrown into, chaos. I want to talk to you about Bloomberg and Bezos because they're one of the same. And here is a quote on from Twitter today from our good friends at the Chicago Teachers Union. Surprised by Bloomberg audio? We're not. Remember, his administration spent $6 million fighting 5 innocent black men who were wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for more than a decade. Michael Bloomberg could arguably be a worse president than Donald Trump. Yep, we said it. Good for the Chicago Teachers Union. And Bloomberg, by the way, and Bezos, are brothers in arms. I mean, I know because they have had these discussions, right?
Yes, although Bezos and Trump have had their disagreements, Bloomberg and Bezos seem to get along just fine. Mm-hmm. And he is a former Republican, by the way, so people should remember that. So if you're a little bit worried about Democrats going Republican light and just, once again, losing a lot of their base, then you might think about that. Also, in terms of those kinds of politics, I mean, we have Republicans actually running for governor against Jay Inslee this year, too. So they're out there, and they're trying to make inroads into progressive areas of the country whenever they can. There are just some seats that are just so safe that won't be able to do it. And so in this part of the country, a lot of times it comes down to not Republicans versus Democrats, but more like progressives versus neoliberals or Democratic Socialists versus Democrats or something like that, where it's much more the progressives versus the OG Democrats. But, what is OG? If we go back to FDR, like I said, he would probably be considered a little radical these days. As far as the media giants getting together, I mean, Bloomberg owns his own book. And I have to laugh, he owns the Washington Post. So when you're at that level of, you don't create networks organically in the way that maybe some of the Bernie Sanders would or something, or I would with my band. You just buy it. You buy people. And we just saw that article about Bloomberg offering people $150 to say nice things about him. So, he actually farms out for supporters and through social networking groups that do that. And, it's kind of fake. You just buy people left and right and think that that's going to work. But it doesn't always work, and it didn't work in the Amazon funded elections here in Seattle. We still have a vibrant community with progressives and democratic socialists and independents and old money Democratic Party representatives and union leaders and teachers and all working together. And so it creates this progressive coalition that gives people cover. And that allows us to be the vibrant place we are. And I should give a shout-out, actually, to the show that's happening this week, which is what we're going to be working on today. They're screening my short film called Ruby 3, which was based on a science fiction character by these really great people who we're going to interview, actually, on Thursday for Democracy Watch News, but they're called ZDS, with a Z, out of Nyack, New York. And they do these incredible audio radio plays. And they go around the world and create field recordings and record in Sumatra and Bali, India, Brazil, all over the world. And then they use those as backdrops for these really well-written, well-acted radio plays that kind of take you all over the world. So I'm excited about that. It's called the Heartbreak Science Fair, and it's the third annual, and it's my former girlfriend, Krista Lee Wolf, who's becoming quite
You're going to be doing commercials of former girlfriends like former boyfriends, right?
We're talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here, the Renaissance man, the guy that never sleeps. As we wrap it up here, Mark, I want to get your thoughts here on, as you see it, the people that you talk to, who are in music, are they better educated, not only about Bernie, but about politics than they say were 4 years ago, before the beginning of Bernie? I really think that, quote unquote, is again thinking about the fact that public option is now mainstream, where it was under Obama considered to be, a liberal panacea. I just think that Bernie deserves a lot of credit for pushing the agenda. And I'm wondering, in a liberal progressive city like Seattle, the people who are sort of, not very political, but like to think of themselves as progressive and so forth, have they really now become more interested in politics because of the last 4 years?
Maybe more aware. And I don't know. We'll see how the voter turnout is in the primaries coming up in Washington State. But I just look at it this way, that people here are first of all, when the right wing was calling Barack Obama a Marxist, most people didn't buy into that here in Seattle because they knew better. Mm-hmm. Same with what people are saying about Bernie Sanders, and nobody's fooled by Mike Bloomberg here in Seattle. He is not a popular guy, and I don't hear anybody ringing his bell. There are people who are just skeptical about politics because of what they've seen, including in the Democratic Party over the last 4 years. And who knows what they're thinking. I know that a lot of people support Bernie Sanders, but then he also has his critics everywhere, of course.
Of course.
So you never know. I think that he is probably the candidate that I hear about most in this city of Seattle. If you hear musicians usually talking about politics, they're talking about Bernie. And it's just because I think he represents a real change. And folks don't know Elizabeth Warren well enough, because she's not from this part of the country, to say that she is also pretty popular. I think both her and Bernie Sanders are considered the real progressive candidates. And the rest of them are sort of like, that would be anybody but Trump. That's cool. But, probably not Biden is not here, because he does represent sort of the corporate wing of the party.
And Buttigieg the same.
I'm just personally kind of skeptical of Mayor Pete.
Yes.
Because he's a little too much of some of the neoliberals that I've known. He's kind of smug, and he reminds me of some people who aren't currently even in office, whose names I won't mention, that I deal with, who are just a little smug and,
yeah. Full of themselves.
Kind of neoliberal kind of thing.
Small town guy with big city values.
Sometimes.
That's what I think about Mayor Pete. Hey, we got to run, my friend. Always great catching up with you. Continue to do that awesome work for the Showbox. You're going to save it. One of these days, we got to get out there and do some live remotes from their great city. Maybe the summertime, we get the Bumbershoot Festival and everything else. All the best, my friend. We'll talk to you next Tuesday.
Best progressive talk show host in the USA. You're hearing him right now, folks. Jeff Santos.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. See you next week. All right. I want to thank Chris for producing the show, given the platform by our good friend Mark Pacheco. Thank you for listening. Go, Bernie, go. We see if you can win by 5 points or more. That's my hope. And keep on fighting, folks. My name is Jeff Santos, and right now it's my time to say I gotta go.
Broadcasting live from the Taunton Federal Credit Union studios at 14 Church Green, we are AM 1530, WVBF, Middleborough, Taunton, and W259DD, Middleborough Center, 99.7 FM.